Hi everybody, welcome to another Chit Chat with GFIS National Solutions. Today I've got a really cool guy, Matt Bell. Matt, I'm going to say former player because you just literally told me you're going to hang everything up. What are you doing? You're so young to hang things up. Why are we not playing some more ball?
It's one of those sports. It's an interesting one, and it's one of the reasons I've always been jealous of tennis players and golfers and people like that. When you played American football, you can't really say to your mates, "Do you want to grab a helmet and pads and go down the park?" Whereas you can grab a couple of tennis rackets and go and hit some balls. But I feel like it's difficult to pad up and run into people in the park for a bit of fun.
Well, you
It's not.
can, and I think didn't Jackass do that for a few years and have a little bit of fun with that?
Yeah, not for me. I had enough hits to the head. I think we'll draw a line on it there.
Fab, yeah, we had a good chat with Rooney, who's the head coach at Durham University, regarding concussion and American football as well. And we started off the conversation about, is the myth that American football players are soft in comparison to rugby players? And it was just the fact that it's slightly different. And growing up in the northeast of England with a lot of my friends who are big rugby fans, I always get that from them. How can you watch American football? It's like watching like soft rugby players play like a hard sport, things like that. And I'm just like, yeah, it's not the case. So how hard are those hits, Matt?
I've played both, and both of them are physical sports. Like whatever way you slice it, they're both physical sports. I think there's a slight difference in the type of athlete you get. So in rugby, you got the last 80 minutes. It's continuous for the most part, so you're out there the whole time. So possibly a bit slower, but more muscular endurance. So more wear and tear. Whereas football, it's short, sharp plays, 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, which means it's the speed is higher. So the hits are at higher speed, which means some of them can be a bit bigger, but I would say in rugby, there's more of them and it's more frequent. So different types of wear and tear, but soft rugby players, I don't think so.
Yeah, I agree. I think I agree with Rooney in the sense that both sports are completely different. They're both physically demanding on the body. They can be really painful, and both sports produce some phenomenal athletes. So, what position did you used to play, and how did you manage to get involved with American football?
I played defensive end. I got involved with the sport. I was up in Durham for rugby league pre-season. I was walking through the cafe and I saw Rooney, and I knew a couple of guys in the team, and Rooney said, "Oh, come have a chat. Come chat about American football," because he'd just taken over as a head coach, so he was recruiting hard. So I sat and had a chat with him. We must have spent 45 minutes talking about American football, his time in the game, what he'd been up to, what he thought I could do in the game, and then I became a Durham Saint after that. That was it. Job done. That I started turning up to American football pre-season the day after, and it all went from there really.
Fab. So, what do you think the difference is from a mentality point of view? And we did some work when you were at Durham as well in terms of the culture of the team, and we talked extensively about the Americans coming over and what they offer and how they can help us in terms of developing the game in England. So, what do you think in terms of that?
The culture that the Americans bring from the NCAA, for the most part, they've all been in very intense programs and they've been working very hard, very results driven. Whereas I think university sport in the UK, maybe not at Durham, where you've got some great teams like the hockey team, they play at an incredibly high level, and that is very intense. And those guys work really hard. But in some of the lower teams, like third team, fourth team, fifth team, in some sports, is a bit more relaxed. And all those guys from the NCAA know is work hard, train hard, play fast, win. And that's the kind of mentality a lot of them bring. You get some that come across and they're happy to be able to relax a bit more. But I think when you train with them, you can't help but sort of get into the mindset of we're going for it, we're working hard, we're going to win. That's what we care about. Just a real winning mentality a lot of them bring. One of them in particular, Side, who came from Harvard, and he was big into winning, and he really ramped it up at practice more than I'd ever seen anyone else do in the 3 years I was there. First year, I think it was a good team. Second year, when Saito and people like Chaz and John came, they really took it up a notch, and they really brought like an intensity to practice that we maybe hadn't seen before, and that improved us as a team. And I really enjoyed playing with those guys.
I think it's really interesting when we're talking about culture of sports, and we have a history of winning at Durham, which is phenomenal. It's a great university, and historically the amount of success that they've had on any sport and field is phenomenal. but it's the small moments, isn't it? It's those three we always talked about. We will win 85, 90% of games because of who we are and how good we are. But that's not what's important. What's important is the final games, the big games, which, it's difficult for the Americans when they've played some matches that, they haven't necessarily been on their A game. They haven't had to try some, really hard, but yet they've still been 30, 40 points up. Where, how do you get your level up for those bigger games than when you've had such an easy ride and a couple of easy games?
In my first year, we definitely struggled with that. That was definitely something that crept in, where we coasted through a lot of the regular season, with the exception of a couple of Sterling games, which I think when we got to Birmingham in the semi-final, because we'd had a reasonably easy ride of it, we just weren't ready to take ourselves to that place that you need to be in to perform at your best. We hadn't been there enough. We didn't know what it felt like to be in a really tight game. So when Birmingham came out and came after us, we didn't fade, but we didn't meet their challenge. We ended up getting beaten quite badly. So moving into the pre-season in year 2, I think one of the things that Rooney and I talked about really hitting on was, we need to make sure that we treat every game like a big game, and we tell the Americans when they arrive, this is a big game. We don't care if you find it easy. We want to win by 50, 60 points every single game. Like, we're not going to treat any of these games like small games, which is an easy thing to say. But then you blend that with a practice environment that reflects how you want to approach each game, where practice is competitive and you're going after each other in practice. And then you keep yourself sharp in the week. And if you turn up at the game and it's a bit easier, you're still in the mindset of, we work hard, we play fast, that's what we do. And then it's easier to stay in that place rather than switch it off and switch it on.
Yeah, I remember having the conversation with you and the team about, how do we maintain it throughout the whole season? Because it's a shortened season. UK sport is not as long as some of the other sports play, and not as many matches. But how do you keep the intensity when some of the games aren't as hard, but then trying to raise it? And I think you're right. I think we came to the establishment that you need to maintain it as much as you possibly can, because you can't afford this roller coaster of up and down performances.
You cut out a bit there. I missed that.
Yeah, I was just talking about up and down performances. You can't really afford to play well one week, really poorly the next week, really good the next week. You've got to maintain some kind of standard, don't you? And we talk about reference point. You have to play to at least your reference point or your ability. As soon as you start playing below that, it's really tough to actually get up for a bigger game or tougher opposition.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, it ties into that practice mindset. Like, when you're at training, that has to be your reference point. You can't allow your reference point to be the game where you played well, because it's so hard to find that again. Like, if you played well 4 weeks ago and you think, oh, well, we'll just do that again. We'll just go to that place in the big game. It's very difficult to do that. It's very difficult to kind of reach back in your mentals and think, what was I doing? How was I playing? What did I feel like? What was my preparation like for that one-off game? Whereas if you treat your training week in the same manner and you always try and hit that standard in training, it's much easier. It's almost like muscle memory, but for the mind, where you're used to performing at that level, you're used to thinking about the sport at that level, and you approach everything with the same intensity. I'm going to say intensity about 1 million times in this call, because really that's one of the main things that we talked about we had to have. So yeah, I think you set your reference point in practice. You don't set it in a game.
Yeah, and I think if we reflect on another sport for this week, because this week we've got the Super Bowl's coming up. It's the big show in the world of American football. But if I just slightly go after another sport, Manchester United won 9-0 against Southampton, and I know Southampton lost 2 players, but they could have won the game 3-0 and 4-0 and coasted. And I don't think in performance sport you should ever have that mindset of winning 3 or 4-0 and just coasting and being on your C game. It is about that intensity, but it's about going and being better, and achieving more and really pushing. Because when those big games come against Chelsea and Arsenal and some of the other bigger oppositions, you need to be on that A game. You can't afford to be playing C or D game.
Man United are a really interesting example, I think, because if you look at them over the season, they are in and out. and they don't do so well in games where they should win. They have great results like the Liverpool result, they have great results like the Southampton result, but then they lose to Sheffield United. So it's interesting because they obviously don't have that reference point about what their base performance has to be. Something I think is missing there with that squad. Now, I agree with you. I think you have to approach every game like you want to win 10-0. And I'd probably approach Monopoly at New Year's Eve like I wanted to absolutely demolish everyone. Like that's what I'm like, which is not for everyone. It rubs some people up the wrong way, especially in a practice environment, because some people do like to ease themselves into their week and ease themselves into the game. But yeah, the United squad, I think, I don't know, Rooney's a big United fan, so you'd probably get some good answers from him about this, but they don't have a reference point. They are out. I don't know if it's to do with the personality mix in the team or the leaders, because I think it comes from your leaders, that type of attitude. Like someone has to set the tone. Someone has to set the tone in practice. So maybe that's Harry Maguire, maybe it isn't. But you also need a group of leaders, because different leaders work for different people. Like you can't have one leader that's responsible for the whole lot, because some players won't respond that well to them. Some players need a different type. Some players need an arm around the shoulder. Some players need to kick up the backside. And I think that's something we've always had in the Saints, is a nice blend of leaders. We've had a leader for everyone, where everyone in the team feels like there's someone they can relate to. So if they don't like me being fired up in training, there's someone else that they can follow that's sort of more on their wavelength. And that's a really important part of it as well, I think.
Cool. I wanted to ask you about leadership, because I think American football's especially if you're not a big fan and you don't watch it and you don't necessarily understand it so much, everybody gets a little bit lost with, you've got offensive line, you've got defensive line, you've got special teams, you've got the kicker. How do you manage leadership in a team when you've got so many different pockets that are organized completely differently with different coaches as well?
That's a very good question, and you definitely see it in the NFL, where certain position groups don't perform as well as other position groups. And why is it? Because having one person that's in charge of each group makes a lot of sense in practice, but on game day you do want clarity. You want clear lines of communication, like who is getting the team fired up, who's doing various different parts of that leadership function. I would say in practice, you've probably got dominant personalities more than leaders who take it on themselves to make sure their position group is up to scratch. Obviously, the coaches drive it, but coaches have always got to be supported by strong characters and vice versa. Strong characters supported by coaches, and through that, you get a nice blend in each position group where they have their own standard, they have pride in their own work. And then when you bring it all together on game day, it's not something I've really ever thought about. I guess we've always had strong characters in each level of our team when I was playing. So we had sides who doing defensive backs. We'd have someone like Ben Reinhardt or Tyler on the offensive line. Then we'd have Dan Yegan at linebackers. Like we've always had strong characters in each position group who have taken that personal responsibility to make sure that their position group isn't going to be the one that lets the team down. Whether you would say they're formally leaders, I don't know. But everyone in the team can be a leader. I think that's normally a good place for a team to be in, where everyone thinks they can be a leader.
Yeah, I get pulled in a lot to do a lot of work with teams where you take a variety of individuals and you try to find the cohesion, you try to find the right rhythm of the team, the right energy levels, the right blend, and then they all go out and perform. And very similar in the world of business, you've got two departments that don't really connect, don't communicate, don't work very well together, but actually they need to, in order to find that flow, to find some performance and productivity. With American football, I have found it slightly different, because you do have this variation of coaching styles, coaching behaviors. There's certainly almost a different culture within the culture. So the offensive team certainly have a slightly different mindset and different culture to the defensive team. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting point to kind of go, how do you take all of these different 3 to 4 sections of an organization and bring them together to make them function? And if you look at it in the NFL, especially, you know, and I think we looked at the Bucs last week, for example, against Aaron Rodgers' team. It was almost, I think Aaron Rodgers' team felt under pressure from the get-go, and I don't think it was purely just Brady. I think it was the pressure Rodgers felt that he was under from a quarterback. What's your thoughts on that?
You wish it was Brady, don't you? You wish it was just TB12 the whole way, driving them on.
He threw 3 interceptions in the last, 10, 15 minutes? And two were really bad throws as well, weren't they?
And I think when you look at those stats in isolation, you can kind of see how American football has a very different dynamic, because the offense were playing badly, but that doesn't necessarily affect the defense, because you're never on the field at the same time. You don't get dragged down by your offense doing badly. You do your own job. And you'll often find that different units in an American football team have different personalities. So certainly at Durham, Ketch led the defense, Rooney led the offense. Both sides of the ball had very different personalities, very different type of character on some of those teams. And I was a defensive player, and I think we like to be quite chippy. We like to play to the whistles, and we like to bring a level of intensity that did it sometimes cross the line, maybe. But that was what we were like. That was what we wanted to bring. Whereas the offense were all about speed and looking good and great plays. And yeah, like we were more workmen, like they were flashy. That's how I describe it. But you know, we'll leave that one for Rooney. And in terms of the Bucs, I think struggling, but the Aaron Rodgers was definitely under pressure because he wasn't supported by a defense like Brady. So I'm trying to think if I've answered that well.
It's fine. It's just a little chat.
Rodgers is definitely under more pressure because he has got a weaker defense.
Yeah, I think you see it live, and especially the Aaron Rodgers one, where could he have ran for the touchdown instead of throwing the ball? And did he make the right decision? Was that pressure? Was that pressure of the moment? Was it pressure of the whole 3.5 quarters? Was it the right decision, just badly executed? Did the Bucs defend really well? You know, you have to give some credit to maybe the defensive line and defensive coach there. There's so many variables in American football that it's very difficult to say this one thing changes the game.
Yeah, the Bucs won because their defense was great when it needed to be.
Yeah.
And that's my opinion. I don't think Brady, he had a good first half. He threw for some touchdowns, but I don't think Brady is the reason they won. Like, I think their defense really stepped up when it needed to. Yeah. After those 2 interceptions back to back, they came out and stopped Aaron Rodgers. They stopped the league MVP, the guy that has been playing unbelievably all season. And you know, he went 3 and out. And I guess for the non-American football fans out there, 3 and out, that's what you call it. If to get a first down, you get 4 plays. And if you have 3, you normally punt. So you call it a 3 and out. Yeah, those 2 stops were critical, and that has nothing to do with Brady. That's all the defensive side of the ball, defensive coordinator, game plan, brave play calling on the defensive side. And I think it ties into what you've been saying about, as a sport, it can be quite segregated, but you all come together for the same result, but maybe not in the same way you would in rugby, football, hockey, tennis.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of expand on that question a little bit, because if for example, you are in the defensive team and you guys are stopping the quarterback, you're stopping the run game, you're stopping points being added to the board, you're coming off 3 and all of the time, and then the offensive line's going on and they're not scoring. You know, how does that feel in terms of the cohesion of the team? Or vice versa, by the way.
I mean, Rooney won't thank me for saying this, but we definitely went through spells, particularly at the back end of my second season, when we weren't scoring as much as I would have liked us to be as a defensive player. And it can be tough. It can be really tough when you're on playing as hard as you can. You come off, you maybe get a stop, they punt, you get the ball, and then 3 plays later, you're back on there. And it happens a few times, and it can start to wear on you. You get tired. And obviously, when you get tired, you lose a bit of the positivity, because you're like, I'm tired. If this keeps happening, I don't know what's going to go on with the team. I don't know if I'm going to win. So yeah, it can be really difficult, and it's a difficult one to come through. And again, I think at that point, you do become quite competitive, and you go, you know what, if they're going to screw this up for us, we're not going to let them. So there's a bit of rivalry there where you think, right, well, the offense can't score, so we're going to try and score. And I think of the Hertfordshire national semi-final when we went down there, and the game was 0-0, I think, into the second quarter, and we were thinking of, we could do with a score here. And Dan, the linebacker, got an interception and ran it in for a touchdown. He got a pick six. And it's kind of that mentality of, well, if it's not working for you, we can go out there and we can make sure we do win. That helps you get through those tough moments when one side of the ball may be struggling.
Yeah, I think it's like every sport. Massively, it's a game that's played mainly in your head, and there's certainly some technical and tactical elements. But your performance mind, how you're thinking about the game, how you respond to actions and reactions in the game, coaches' decisions, team scoring, not scoring, penalties. I think it's a game that could literally really get to you mentally if you allowed it to. But also, if you're really in that growth mindset, then you've got an opportunity to enhance everybody around you.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think the best way to answer that, because I mean, can you rephrase the question? Because I feel like
absolutely not. You said before that was a good question, Graham. I'm sticking with my good question. Yeah, it's a tough game. I think everybody talks about American football, the physicality of the game, the hits. They talk about how hard it is, how fast these guys are, how strong they are. And I mentioned to Rooney that I saw a documentary by ESPN Sports Science. It's going back a good 10 years now, and they actually measured how hard these guys hit you. But actually, there's a huge mental element of the game as well, isn't there?
Oh yeah, definitely. So were you kind of driving at when the results aren't going your way, and the physical element, it can really start to get on top of punishment. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Somebody like Brady, who goes and scores first drive, you're 7-0 down in a minute and 30 or 2 minutes. And everything you've worked on that week is about stopping Brady, is about stopping the offense, keeping it tight, getting possession, running the clock down. And he just goes and throws 3 or 4 balls, incredible, scores a touchdown, 7-0 up. And all of a sudden, mentally, you're in a different mindset.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's probably similar with any sport. Like tennis, you can go out and go, I'm not going to give up any easy breaks, and then you get broken to love in your first game because you're not quite switched on. Similar type of environment. Yeah, it's tough. And the thing that really gets me about those situations where you game plan really hard and it doesn't go right is you have to accept that a game plan won't go right. I think you have to be okay with that in your head, because whilst you can spend your entire week analysing them, what are they going to do? What are they going to throw at us? How do they want this game to look? They're going to make changes as well. So you can't get too caught up in the game plan. Like you've got to accept the fact that there'll be things that you've not seen. There'll be things you haven't prepared for. They will do things that you don't expect them to do. And you haven't game planned for that, and that's okay. But I think you have to focus on is, does my game plan work in the situations where the game's going how I think it's going to go? So if you've prepared for Brady to run a set of 10 plays that you've seen him do a lot of times throughout the season, are you doing well in those moments? And if you are, you can sort of counteract well, he's just done something spectacular that I haven't seen him do for about 5 years. He's just launched over our heads 40 yards. So you have to kind of take a balanced view and go, am I doing well in the moments when I'd expect to do well because I've planned for it? Can I move on past those freak moments where someone does something unbelievable, we make a small mistake? And I think that's always the approach I took. Like, on balance over the course of the game, one bad moment might get counteracted by 10 good moments. Yeah. So if the first drive goes badly, you've got to just take the approach, well, we can make sure that the next 10 are good. Or even if the next 3 are bad, you can always say, well, as long as you make the next ones good, we can still be in this game. So you can't get too caught up on those, one-off failures of your game plan. You can't let it get you down. You have to have faith in the work you've done, I think, and you have to believe in the preparation you've done, that eventually, at some instance in the game, it will pay off, and that could be a really key moment.
Yeah, no, I agree. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about that whole kind of game planning thing is I hear a lot of, or I have heard a lot of people over the years turn around and say, "Oh, American football, it's too scripted. You know, everybody knows what they're doing. They're running slants, they're running long. You know, they're throwing to this and they're throwing to that." And then I kind of say, well, isn't every sport scripted? So football certainly do short corners and long corners and throw-ins, you know, and free kicks. That's all scripted. Hockey have their own kind of penalty corners. That's all scripted. Tennis have almost pattern recognition points where you know where the player's going to go. So you'll work 2 to 3 to that side, and then you'll go down the line. So how do you feel about the fact that people just kind of go, American football is a bit boring because it's just purely scripted? You know what you're doing. There's no creativity there.
Yeah, the tough thing is because of the way the game looks, it's got quite a high barrier for the casual fan. Like it's difficult to just stick it on and view it as 11 unbelievable athletes playing in the NFL who are some of the best athletes in the world doing exceptional things physically. It's hard to see it that way because you see them all line up, you see the coach make the call, you see the headset, and you think, oh, well, it's all formulaic. I think it's like anything in sport, though. You talked about the patterns in tennis. Your pattern in tennis works until they go up the line when you think they're going to go across court. Your game plan in American football works when you think Tom Brady's going to hand it off all the time, but then he starts throwing it all over the place. So people game plan, and I agree with you, people game plan in every sport. Federer steps up to the line, he wants to serve an ace. He doesn't want to roll one in just for jokes, to have a nice rally. Like he wants to serve an ace. That's his game plan. Tom Brady wants to score touchdowns. But like any sport, plays break down. You know, if it's well defended, if your free kick is well defended, it will break down. If Tom Brady drops back to pass and it's well defended, the play breaks down, and you do start to see athletes, someone like Lamar Jackson, unbelievable at it, just do incredible things in the moment with his speed and his quickness. So it is scripted, but as you say, any sport is scripted. And I think you have to appreciate the quality of athletes and some of the things that they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty pleased that I've managed to get you to talk about Tom Brady so much in the last 10, 15 minutes, which is fab because I know how much you love him. And I was so careful on not saying that there's no creativity and that's just because you're a Dolphins fan. But I didn't want to upset all the Dolphins fans. So I'm gonna slide that one. I'm gonna slide it, Matt. But I do think we should go back to TB12, but not necessarily him. Him and Mahomes this weekend. You know, you've got, I guess, you know, people talk about Mahomes being the young pretender to the crown, and I think he's already there. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's a great quarterback. He's been there and he's done it. He's already at the top of the game. But you measure American football at the NFL purely by rings, don't you? And Brady's got 6. Is he gonna get there? Can he be better than Brady in terms of rings?
Can he? Of course he can. If he wins this week, that's 2 in 2 years. The guy's only 25, which gives him 15 years to win 4. So you like his chances if they can keep that Chiefs team together. But I don't agree that it's all about the rings you get, because how do you view a team sport? Do you think that one individual can stand out above the rest of the team, the rest of the organization? Do you think Brady is the GOAT because he's Brady, or is he the GOAT because he played on a great team?
Are you asking me as a fan?
I'm asking you as a fan of that team.
If you ask me as a fan of that team, that team.
Where do you stand on the Brady Belichick debate?
Yeah, we had that with Rooney, and who's more important than the coach or the player? You can't have that debate, and I have to stick my professional hat on and not my fan hat on, because Tom Brady doesn't exist without a defensive line protecting him. He doesn't exist without phenomenal amounts of weapons over the years making great catches. He doesn't exist without great coaching. So, as in all sport, in any sports team, it's a combination of so many different variables. What has surprised me this year, and I know the Bucs have already got a really good side, and they brought in a couple of really good weapons to help Brady out, but it has surprised me how well they've done this year. And he certainly brings something exceptional in that position as quarterback that other quarterbacks don't bring. And whether it's a motivation, whether it's a belief, he's certainly not the best mover. So you can't give him that. You can't say he has an ability to get outside the pocket and run 10, 15 and then scrape you that first down, because he doesn't necessarily do that. But he does have a winning mentality that he brings. And I think the Bucs organization have certainly increased in their value this year by having Tom Brady at the helm. Go.
I think I agree with you. I think he's very good in the tough moments, and some athletes are better in the tough moments than others. If you look in recent history, a sport like tennis, obviously you're a tennis player, there are 3 particular athletes that are better in big moments than others, and I think Tom Brady is one of those.
Yeah.
Would you say that talent-wise, Tom Brady's better than Aaron Rodgers? I don't think so. I think Mahomes is more talented than Brady, but Brady is unbelievable in big moments. Is someone like Rafa Nadal more talented than Nick Kyrgios? It's an interesting question. It's a debate for tennis fans, but Kyrgios has a lot of talent, but Nadal is absolutely better in the big moments. So that's one thing you can definitely say. So yeah, I think I agree with you. I think what Brady has brought to the Bucs is the ability to be good in big moments, which is different to the ability to just be good.
And some of that, by the way, Matt, is I think you're right. It's not about Brady's talent. It's maybe about the fact that he's been there so many times. This is just pretty normal for him. Playing in a playoff semi-final or even going to the Super Bowl, he's done it that many times that he's just a little bit more relaxed than some of the quarterbacks who maybe have only been there once or twice, because they're thinking that's it. He's thinking, well, I've already been there, and won 6 rings. So is it that important? It'll be interesting this week, Matt, though, because I did a little session on early in the week about pressure. And I'm not sure whether Tom Brady's thinking right now, this is my last goal. And at some stage of any athlete's career, when you think, this is my last goal, there's a little bit of doubt. And those 3 passes in last week's game, I just thought they were very un-Brady-like. 2 of them were poor passes.
He's been very clever. Whenever anyone asks him, when are you going to hang it up? He traditionally always said in 10 years. And I think now he says 45. And I think what he is very good at managing his own mentals. And what he's doing there is he's not allowing himself to be in a position where people are saying it's his last go. He thinks it's his last go. He feels like it's his last go. He said to people, I'll retire at 45. And everyone thinks, well, Tom Brady's going to retire at 45. So what he's done there is create some space for himself where people aren't asking that question. He maybe doesn't feel that way about this game. He might think, well, the Bucs are a good team. We'll do it next year. So again, I think he's managing the situation in a really intelligent way, which should take the pressure off himself and not create this kind of last ride mentality that he might have if he had said this was his last season.
Cool. So from a player's point of view, Matt, where does that come from? Does that come purely from Tom Brady? Is that scripted? Has he had to work on that extensively? So obviously working in the world of performance psychology, I think it's such an important role, but I still don't see enough players who aren't at the elite level who really take it seriously and work on it enough. Do you think Brady's done that, or do you think it's just been over time that he's built it up?
That's a really good question. I often think about our Saints team when I think about pressure and big moments and our progression. So year 1 was get hammered in the semi-final. Year 2 was win a difficult semi-final, fall short in the final. Year 3 was win the final. And I do think that as a player, when you're exposed to big moments, you can become more comfortable in them. I definitely think there's an element of when you go through it, you get better at it, because it is hard to think about what is playing in this final going to feel like, what will playing in this final mean. You can't really plan that unless you've been. However, I do think people can take steps during the week to be in a place where they can accept those feelings when they arrive. So I certainly wasn't very good at it when we got to the national final. the first time. I was pretty terrible at it. I think when the time came, I was very excited and I didn't really deal with it in the right way. I don't think I played my best game. And I think someone like Brady probably works on it during the week. He's probably worked on it since he was at Michigan, just allowing himself to be comfortable enough that when the emotions are all over the place and he's in a big game, it doesn't affect him as much as, an amateur like me. When I turn up and I think, oh my God, I'm in a final, Brady turns up and thinks, I've prepped in the week, I'm feeling these emotions, but it's fine because I know I can play. So I think it's a bit of both. You get exposed to it, you get better at it, but you also allow yourself to be able to handle those different emotions, and you prepare yourself to be able to withstand the spikes in emotion that you feel in a big game.
Yeah, I don't mind that as an answer. And I think that whatever level that you're at, you can prepare better. You can mentally prepare better for that level. So if you are an amateur, you can massively prepare for a semi-final of an amateur cup in the same way Brady would prepare for the final of a Super Bowl. It's just a slightly different level and a slightly different, to use your word, intensity. Matt, this has been a phenomenal insight into the world of American football and university football. I have one massive question to ask you before we go.
Yeah.
What do you think? Who's going to win it?
Dolphins next year. That's what I think.
Listen, if the Dolphins win it next year, I will send you my T-shirt.
I want you to eat that T-shirt if the Dolphins win.
Yeah, I've probably been in the house that long that actually that's the only thing I can eat in the house.
Yeah, another 100 days of shielding, and that'll be what you need to eat. Yeah,
absolutely. So, who do you think?
I really like the Bucs defense. Like, they've had patches in the season where they haven't looked so great, but if any defense can get after Patrick Mahomes, I think it's the Buccaneers, and their defensive line is very good. They've got a lot of speed coming off the edge. That being said, Mahomes is unbelievably talented. The guy can do anything with the ball. As a defensive player, I'm always going to say that the defense will make the difference, though. So I think the Bucs can win.
Fab, and that's Tom Brady's team, and I'm so pleased that you're supporting Tom on this one.
I'm not supporting either of them. It pains me to say it. I wanted Aaron Rodgers to win it this year, but
funny enough, I also wanted Green Bay to win it. I thought at Lambeau, I just thought they would be too strong. But from the get-go, that very first play, Brady goes down, scores, puts 7 on the board. And I just think the whole Pack team just felt a little bit on edge. They didn't look relaxed throughout the whole game.
I think it all ties back to some of the conversation we've had about what is your base level and what's your reference point. And I think Brady was fully aware on that first drive that he'd beaten them. I think it was 30 points to 6 earlier in the season.
Yeah.
I think Brady knew that. And I think he knew that if I score now, I'm going to put them back in that place mentally where they think we are going to absolutely wallop them.
Yeah.
So he went down and scored a touchdown. I think he did. I think he did put the backers back in that place where they just lost 30 points to 6. I think he forced them into that place and they didn't want to be there. They probably wanted to come out, stop him, score, get into the game, but just continued where they left off in Tampa.
Yeah, at Lambeau with all the cheeseheads. Well, not so many cheeseheads this year, but I thought they would have too much. And you're right. He went down and he does what TB12 does best, and he's always done. And he does something that not a lot of quarterbacks and not a lot of teams can do. And I'm not going to use the word choke. I don't think the Pack choked. But I do think they just didn't perform at their reference point for what they have done all season. They've been phenomenal this season.
I mean, you can make good decisions in a game that aren't the right decision. And I'll unpack that a little bit. I think whenever you're playing sport, you're a tennis player, you've got all the different shots and you pick one. And you might not pick the right shot to win the point, but it can still be a good shot. And I think it's the same with football. When Aaron Rodgers didn't run it in, I don't think that was a bad decision. People have picked that play out and gone, he did the wrong thing. But actually, if you think about the moment, he did the right thing. He didn't turn the ball over. He didn't do anything silly. He probably thought he was going to get another go at it. But so they made a lot of good decisions, but in the big moments, they didn't make the right decision. And I think that's a really tough thing probably for them to reflect on this week. They'll all be thinking about, oh, well, I did this and it was a good play, but the right thing to do would have been this. And that, again, is another tough part about playing sport is the reflection and beating yourself up afterwards and thinking about decisions you made and what you could have done different. And yeah, I think Green Bay were good. I think they played good football, but there were some decisions where they made good decisions that weren't the right decisions. And one of them was Aaron Rodgers running it in, but he shouldn't get crucified for that. Because
he's a phenomenal quarterback.
If you're 37 getting chased down by a guy that's 26, trying to get a new contract, significantly bigger and significantly quicker than you, you're probably going to chuck it away.
Yeah.
So, you can't really blame him. 7 yards looks like a short distance, but it probably felt like a long way from him in that moment in time.
Yeah, I agree. And on that note, I'm going to let you go back and do some work. Matt, brilliant. Thank you very much. Hope you've enjoyed it. And hopefully you'll watch the Super Bowl and you'll see where's he going to put the 7th ring? That's my biggest question.
I'm not going to answer that.
Thanks, Matt. You take care. Speak soon.
Thanks, Graham.
Cheers, bud.